Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Conversations on Conversations, where each week we explore a topic to help us have more powerful conversations with ourselves and others. I'm your host, Sarah Noll Wilson, and you can hear the full body smile in my face as I talk. So let me introduce our guest, Katrina Jones. And together we're going to start by exploring the time we're in of people really pausing, reflecting, and prioritizing different things in their life and how things have shifted and what does that look like and what does that look like personally, but also how do we adapt to that in the workplace? So as always, we'll see where our conversation goes, but I'm so excited. All right. So for those of you who may not remember, Katrina was actually one of our first guests, and we talked about how do we stay soft during hard times, which is one of our top downloaded episodes. So if you have not checked it out, please be sure to do so. So Katrina Jones is the founder and CEO of Advancing Equity and Inclusion, a diversity, equity, and inclusion and talent consulting and coaching firm. As a principal consultant, she helps organizations connect their programmatic efforts to comprehensive DEI strategies that help accelerate their progress in building more diverse teams and fostering more inclusive, equitable, and psychologically safe cultures. Katrina has more than 15 plus years of experience leading and managing in functions in DEI, HR, and talent at companies like AWS, Latham Watkins in Europe. She believes that when we can prioritize closing equity gaps, our workplaces can become spaces of learning and growth where everyone thrives. Katrina.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi. Welcome to the show.
My love. Thank you. I am honored to be a two-time guest and to be reunited with you again. It has been too long.
Reunited, and it feels so good. It feels so good.
Yes, ma'am.
I do just want to reach through the screen and give you just a full body hug.
But yes. All the way to the toes. It's like tippy toes.
Everyone joining us, we'll just invite you in this love fest and this journey. Okay. No, but one of the things I'm so excited, again, for those of you who maybe remember the conversation Katrina and I had, is you bring such a depth of wisdom, a poetic way of talking about very human challenges and struggles. And I'm just excited to be in conversation exploring. And the timing of this topic is, I think it's always important.
Yeah.
But it feels like there is a collective shedding by some folks, not everyone, but a collective shedding. So first, just catch us up. What do you want us to know about you since last time we met up together on here?
Oh, gosh. I feel like I have lived 3 lives since the last time we talked. I'm literally in a different state and city. My main relationship has changed. My parenting status has changed. I'm a full-time single parent now.
Got it.
Living in Houston, Texas. I've gone back into consulting work now, which I really love, and partnering with so many brilliant people who are doing the work on the inside of companies, right? As these momentous shifts are happening, yes, internally within companies, but in our world. And I mean, we see signs of it everywhere, right? The strikes happening right now. So yes, some of it is about fair pay for the labor that people are doing, but there's an undercurrent and a thread, I think, through all of it of people wanting more in their lives, wanting to be able to do more. And certainly money is part of that, right? But wanting more for themselves, for their families. And that's, what I have also been living is peeling back the layers to realize I want more. The things that I thought were really important, like going back to and looking back at 20-something-year-old me and the vision that I had for my life, the goals that I set, achieving so much of it, really, and probably more than what I expected. And then kind of stepping back and saying, this is it? Like, it's not, it doesn't feel like how I thought it would feel. I thought I would feel X, Y, Z. I thought I would feel this. I thought I would feel like really like I've made it, like I'm at the top of Mount Everest, right? Like my life is sorted out. And I've been
Don't you love 20-year-old ourselves that are like, you're going to figure it out.
I do.
It's going to feel so great. And then you realize it's a lie.
Yeah. All of it is a lie. That it's not when you're 30, not when you, guess what? You don't.
No,
you don't.
You're just figuring it out.
Yeah. All along the way. But when you're in your early 20s, you're like, yep, this is what I'm going to do. This is what my plan is. I'm going to do these things. This is where I see myself. And you know, you cannot predict how life goes.
Yeah.
And how the vision that you have for yourself will change. Like the things that were important to me 10 years ago, they don't have the same resonance.
Yeah. Well, and even one of the things that I see even 4 years ago.
Yeah.
What's important has shifted and has changed. And I'm curious, what are you observing related to that, wanting to do more? Because that's definitely something, the reshifting of work as the centralized thing.
Yeah.
That's still very true for a lot of folks. And for others, it has to be true because of the way our system is set up.
Yeah.
And so that they can get the finance, the money that they need to live and survive. But there is this overwhelming sense of more people are saying, I don't know that I want to tolerate that anymore. I don't know that I want to put up with that anymore. That's not worth it. That's not, the trade-off isn't worth it to me for what I'm getting out of it. So I'm curious, what are you observing?
And you said 4 years ago, and I mean, think about 4 years ago. Like when you said that, I immediately thought back to, okay, 4 years ago, I was probably like flying. I was traveling. I was working really hard. And that was kind of my pride and where I felt a lot of fulfillment, or a good bit, chunk of fulfillment. And I'll be blunt here. I don't think you can see millions of people die, right? Like literally overnight.
Yeah.
And and across generations, ages, and not be affected by that.
Yeah. Whether you want to acknowledge it or not.
Yeah. Seeing people who, just like you, were working really hard, putting in those 60, 70 plus hours a week. And then, you're in the ground or you're in a jar, and that's your life. And so what I think is happening for so many people is they're seeing that the time between the moment that you enter the world, the time between, the period at the end of your sentence is really short.
Yeah.
We think it's long, and it ain't. And I feel that intensely. I have felt that intensely, yes, because of the pandemic and seeing so many people, die at young ages. People, in my network who have their lives have been affected, right? They've got long-term COVID, long-term illnesses and other illnesses. Yeah. And also, before that, seeing my mom pass away at what was a young and is a young age, she was 75 and I thought she was going to live to be like 100 with modern healthcare and, a good Whole Foods shopping habit. And it just made me pause and step back and realize, wait a minute, like, okay, I've done these things. This has been really important to me, but I don't know. I don't know. Like if I had, 30, 40 summers left, is this how I want to spend the time? Is this how I want to spend the time? And that is what I think is happening for people all across the globe, and especially, workers, and recalibrating their relationship to work, where, we spend more time at work than we do with our families, with our loved ones. Is that the right equation?
Mm-hmm.
I know it's what it always has been.
Right.
But is that what it should continue
Is that what it should be?
Is that what it should be? And that just, having that, the pause that I think we've collectively had leaves open and creates space for us to ask these questions about what we want our lives to look like, how we want to spend our time, who we want to spend our time with.
Yeah. There's two paths that I want to explore with you. And the one path I want to go to for a little bit amount of time is exploring and examining the workplace response to this. Because one of the things that I've observed is, whether it's a frustration by those people who are in positions of power and authority, that people are questioning things that they didn't question before. Yeah. Literally just this weekend, I was at the farmer's market and stopped by this stand where they do dog food, right? Dog treats.
I love those.
And and it was really sweet, but it was an interesting conversation with the owner. And I said, how's business going? And love that you're a woman-owned business, and happy to support you. And and she said, it's just really hard because people just don't want to work anymore. And it's always interesting when I hear that phrase. I'm going to be honest. It really triggers something in me. It pushes against something hard, because it's one thing to say, staffing is hard right now.
Yeah.
It is It's hard to find, whether it's part-time, whether it's within the budget I can afford. It's just difficult right now in a way that it wasn't. And it was an interesting interaction, because I said, I hear you. And I said, the pandemic changed a lot for a lot of people. And her response was, that's over. And I went, it's not, but okay, but it's different. But I said, well, here's what I see in my work, right?
Yeah.
Is that it really challenged people's fundamental beliefs and values and how they wanted to spend their time. And, and to your point, what they thought was important isn't what they think is important now. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, because I haven't talked about this on the show. It just came up with a client last week, especially as companies are exploring the return to office and hybrid and what do we do? And obviously, there's a big push by senior leaders to get people back into the office, and workers are like, whoa.
Yeah.
One of the things that feels so different about this time is that isn't unique to an organization.
Yeah.
It is this collective
spread. Yeah.
energy on top of the strikes, on top of, and so I'm just curious to hear your thoughts and thinking about how this reevaluation, this recalibration, this prioritization is pushing against how work has always been done. And I know you're preaching to the choir of and we're here for it.
No, but I wonder what is going to be that final thing that sets the match, because it feels like we get closer and closer to a boiling point with every event that's happening. And it's so interesting now to see, and this is such a contrast between where we were and this is a full-on pandemic, right? Where there was much more flexibility, employers were adapting. And there was this sense of, this is a time when we need to adapt. We need to experiment, to be flexible, right? We're going to do this, and things might change. What we know is nothing is constant now, right? And what I see and perceive as a desire to get back to a state of constant that just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Like we are not getting back to people getting on planes and flying and being in the office, 4 or 5 days a week. Even though folks are trying to get people there by hook or crook, right? And now you see a lot of it being, yes, judgmental and compliance driven. There was an article about TikTok. They have an app that tracks employees' time in the office. And if employees are not meeting the desired time in the office, they get notifications, all these things. And they're not the only one, right?
Yeah.
So the surveillance is happening. But what you're seeing is less that flexibility, that adaptability. That's being pulled back, right? That's being erased.
Yeah.
Like it didn't exist. And I was at an HR networking event last week, and this was a hot topic of conversation because employers have mandated a certain number of days a week, 3 days a week, or 5 days a week. People are talking about what they're doing. Somebody was saying, well, we're going from 4 days a week, like from 3 to 4. Okay, well then what about 5? And it will work for some people, right? And maybe it works. The employer is trying to drive collaboration, connection, to drive innovation. And they want people to be in the building because that's where the magic happens, or they think that's where the magic happens.
That's where it's happened to this point for them.
But what they're running up against is people saying, actually, working from home really makes my life easier, right? I'm able to work a set number of hours. I'm able to also maybe get some things done. It makes my commute easier. I don't want to spend my time, 10 hours a week or more commuting. That's not how I want to spend my time. I want to be able to pick my kids up and take them to the playground in that hour that I would have been commuting from the office.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're at the reckoning point. And I imagine we will be there. I'm not a fortune teller, but I imagine we will be there soon. I don't know what that event is that's going to tip us over the edge, but something has to give. And what I would love to see leaders, employers, I would love to see especially senior level leaders come together and say, hey, this isn't working. And we are going to collectively, protest, or we're going to collectively influence, senior leaders, management, executive management, to take a different approach. And maybe it's hybrid. Maybe it's just some flexibility, right? I think you have to do what works, yes, for your company, but also for the talent you want to attract, which people prefer flexibility. And it's not just young people. It's not just moms. It is everybody. And there are some people who across all generations will actually want to come into the office because they like being in person. So what can you do to adapt in this moment? In the way that you were adapting, you were experimenting, you were willing to try different things and say, hey, we're going to try. And if it doesn't work, we'll do something. We're going to modify. We're going to tinker in the same way we would do with any business problem. Right?
I think one of the things that I'm seeing in some organizations, and it's interesting to, I don't know that I'd made this connection before hearing you talk about it, because in our work, we do talk a lot about experimentation and how it's important to do that. But the thing that I hadn't connected till you were talking about it is the fact that we were all forced to experiment. We were all forced to try new things. We were all willing to say, it might not work and let's figure it out. And I think one of the traps that I'm seeing is decisions are being made as a decisive decision instead of an experiment.
Yeah.
And so then you have team members who are going, but what's going to be the evidence of success here? What's going to be the measurement? What's going to be the evolution of this? And there's a experience or a perception that, no, this is just the decision. And whether right, wrong, or otherwise, senior leaders have authority.
Yeah.
I mean, that's also just the reality. They can be decisive with it. But I think that point you bring up is a really important one of, for the people who thrived or found new ways of, of having the restrictions lifted of what was possible.
Yeah.
It can feel constrictive or right now.
Yeah.
Because there doesn't seem to be that openness and that willingness. And,
there's just a declarative statement.
It's just a declarative statement. And again, there is the authoritative right for them to do that. And then there's also consequences to it. Or people might need to decide, is this where I want to work? It's also interesting to hear the idea of like, and what if middle management just protest it? And I was like, shit. Yeah. Like, I mean,
yeah.
What would happen?
And I name them because in some companies where they're surveilling and relying on compliance, middle managers are the responsible ones.
Yeah. And they don't necessarily want to be. Like some of them don't want to be.
I feel so bad for folks, right? Like managing teams, managing people is hard enough. And I've got to have a conversation with you now about how you've come in 2 days, but not 3 days.
Yeah. And
what is the issue? When I know the issue is working from home works better for you and you're just as effective. You're just as connected. You're just as innovative. You just can't come in 3 days.
Yeah.
You just can't come in 3 days a week. And that, what do you do with that? Right? Like managers don't have the tools to be, because really what's the solution there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And how does, I mean, I understand measuring expectations. I get all of that, but that the language you're using of surveillance is really interesting. And how does that impact trust? And how does that impact, I mean, just how does that impact trust and your like commitment to me? And, I think we're in real interesting times.
I use that language intentionally because
I can tell.
Like when you have a work badge, you scan in, you know that's being clocked, right? And that somewhere there's a machine, if they want to, they can pull up all your swipes, right? We could do this like a Law and Order episode, like you were in at 9:02, you were out at 6:04. But you internalize that when all of a sudden there are messages going out saying, hey, we noticed that you're only here 2 days instead of 4 days. Or you see colleagues who are being pulled into meeting rooms to talk about how they're not meeting the requirement, right? Or there's an app that's how should I feel about that, right? Like I know, and now I really internalize it. You are tracking my moves.
Right. And I don't know about you. I certainly don't thrive in that kind of environment.
It doesn't feel
I don't think most people do.
It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. Yeah.
Okay. So that's an organizational exploration. And obviously this is a topic that we can continue talking about. And this will be one that I have some future guests that will continue to. But I want to take us back a little bit and then go more that personal side of reflection and letting go. One of the things when you were talking about, the vision you had when you were 20 about what your life would be, and then you got it and you're like, is this it?
Yeah.
Is this all? Or, sometimes, or you accomplish it and you're like, well, shoot, what's next? Like I did. Now what? What are some of the traps or potential, what do I want to say? Thinking traps that could get in people's way of being able to step into new possibilities? Oh,
the supposed tos. I'm supposed to. I'm supposed to. I'm supposed to be married to stay married. I'm supposed to want to have kids. I'm supposed to have kids. I'm supposed to want to move up the organizational ladder. I should want to get a promotion. I should want that head of whatever. Why don't you want that? The supposed to. I think, and buying into other people's visions for what you should be doing, including, your parents or other loved ones, as well as comparison, right? So seeing folks who are about the same age and same industry or similar, and you're seeing, it's like they're on that super fast escalator and you're on a slower ones, right? And you're looking at that and saying, well, gee, I'm just as smart. I work just as hard. Why am I not there? I should be. But is that what you really want? I was talking about this with a friend, and they were in a particular industry. They've left it more or less, and they have their own practice, and they're still connected to the industry that they left. And I'm pausing here because I think they've still maybe got like a couple toes in, right? But that's not where they are. And they see peers who are, senior level executive and all that comes with that. That looks really shiny, I think, on the outside, because you're just seeing maybe an article that they co-wrote or published, or a LinkedIn post where they're at this big event, or et cetera, or they're in a commercial. So you see that and you think, well, gee, that could have been me. And we were talking about that and about what it was bringing up for them. And I asked them, but is that what you want to do? Well, no. And it's hard because you will see that there's that comparison, the envy piece, and that's normal. I don't, there's no judgment about that. I think when you feel it, you should tap into it. You should really feel it and say, okay, well, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? Is it because I really want that? Or is it maybe because there's something about my current path that maybe feels a little uncharted, unsettled, or is taking me in a different direction? And maybe I'm mourning the loss of what I thought I was going to do, where I thought I was going to be, what I thought I wanted, as I'm pursuing this newness that I believe is where I want to be, is going to be more fulfilling. But all of that, I'm supposed to, the comparison, that envy that comes with comparison, and thinking about where you think you're supposed to be, you should be, relative to where you really want to be. And it's hard to, when you're in between those two, to even get the time to step back and say, and think. And some of that is because you're so busy. So what happened for me was that I was always so busy. I didn't really have time, like where things were really quiet, where I could really think. But I would get little bubbles that would pop up from time to time. And I just kind of like, all right, man, and then I'm off to the next thing. And then at a certain point, because of some health scares I had to really pause, and things were quiet. And in that silence, in that pause, you can't keep like pushing things down, batting it away. You really have to reckon with it. And it's hard to even have the time and space to do that. And if you do the reckoning part, like, cause you can just say, let me put you in the basement. Not today.
Yeah. Yeah. You spend so much time on autopilot too, right? Yeah. I mean, and I appreciate the different things that you called out. Just this morning I was telling Nick, I was like, I'm finding myself comparing myself to these people, and I don't even know why. Yeah. And it's not even like, to your point, I'm like, it's not like I actually feel threatened, but there's some part of me that's like anticipatory, right? Like threats or something like that. I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from, but and shedding that vision of what you thought would be. And especially in our, we'll speak American culture, there is these really strong life milestones, right? You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to get the job. You're supposed to be really career driven. You're supposed to have the kids. You're supposed to. And that was something that it took me a while to have the courage to say no to.
Yeah.
For us, we're childless by choice. And that did not come easy for me because I was like, there must be something wrong with me that I don't.
Yeah.
That I don't have that yearning. And, and the other point that I'm glad you brought up and I was going to ask about is also the grief, especially if you're in a situation. Well, you know what? I want to walk what I was just going to say back. There can be grief and loss when something is decided for you. Yeah. Right? Maybe you're let go from a job, partner leaves, right? Unexpected, literal death, something unexpected that's out of your control. And there can still be grief when you choose to do it. When you consciously choose to go in a different path, there can be grief for that identity of what was, and honoring that and giving space to that. Yeah. I feel like especially in our culture, many people don't give the space for that loss.
You don't. And we think about grieving as singularly being tied to death or to loss, right? Some of the examples that you named, like unexpected loss of a job, yes, people can understand some grief, but you really don't get the time and space to actually be with it. Like if someone gets fired, we think they should kind of be on to the next thing in like a week? Maybe 2. They should be over it, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that there are stages, there are so many emotions that you might go through. You might be heavily impacted by some trauma as you are going through the grieving process. And it's not something that you could just like spend a weekend in the tub and just, Calgon it away or whatever, relax it away. It's not going to, like, a few bath bombs aren't going to take it all down to nothing. And especially, I love what you hit on, the grief even in intentional choices, that when you walk away from that big job or that career arc in an industry that you pursue, that you devoted yourself to, or that relationship, right? That a couple of years ago, you might have been thinking about, what are we going to do for a 10-year anniversary? And now you're figuring out the divorce process.
Yeah.
And I say this as somebody who has gone through that recently, that there was grief in it, and realizing that, some of it was, I felt like I was blowing up my life, right? So some of the grief that people go through is I'm stepping out into this unknown, and it's scary, and it's a courageous choice, an intentional choice, but I know folks won't understand it. They will probably give me flack for it. And yet and still I'm walking into this wilderness.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that so vulnerably. And what was coming up for me is, and it's okay that other people don't understand it.
Yeah. So that's
not always easy, but it's like, this is what was right for me, or there may be information you will never know, or whatever the case is that contributed to this decision, or, because sometimes I think we can, you see people as simplified versions of themselves, like the identity of, well, no, it's, if it's a relationship, it's you and this person, or if it's a job, oh, well, you've always been in this kind of role.
What else will you do?
Yeah. And not only is it courageous to quiet your space down so you can listen to the things that are bubbling, but it's so courageous to take action on those. So I want to name, without knowing all the details of your circumstances, like I can tell that it was a real big act of courage for you to live your true and take whatever steps forward to what this new chapter is for you.
Yeah. I think it's hard. And I am open and vulnerable about it because I think it's important to do so, to know that, you could be, even if you're decades in, right? If you're, I often hear this about people who leave a particular industry after they've spent X amount of time, but they've built up a successful career. How could they just walk away from it all? Yeah. But you can. That's the beauty of life, is that you could pick up and say, look, this no longer serves me. And I've got to do something different. And I don't know what that different is right now, but I'm going to figure it out.
And that's totally okay.
And that's perfectly okay. But it is also hard to do in a world that expects you to have answers, to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, and to have everything mapped out neatly, and that things are going to be a constant, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's this whole idea of uncertainty, and a comfort with it is something that I've been examining for myself, more related to my anxiety and OCD, and from the standpoint of so much of anxiety really comes down to a discomfort with uncertainty.
Yeah. Yes.
and just realizing that literally everything is uncertain. It's uncertain that your life will look the way it looks now. It's uncertain who you'll be with or not be with, or it's uncertain. I mean, it's all uncertain. And that felt. It seems so obvious.
Oh, I know.
But it was so profound when I made that realization of, oh shit, this is really a discomfort with uncertainty. Yeah. And to realize literally nothing is certain. The only thing that's certain is death, right? At some point, we're going to die. That's the literally one thing that we're really certain about. At some point, that's going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah. But what happens between now and then, and you can't predict, right? What 20 years will bring, what 10 years will bring, what life will be like. And so there's a bit of savoring where you're at, and also embracing the transitions when they come, because I do feel like it's not if, it's when they come.
It is when. Yeah. I think the savoring is really important as well. And it's my therapist, who is awesome, had me go through an exercise that, we, over the different roles that I've had in different organizations, I've had some really amazing opportunities, and there also have been some challenges and, some trauma mixed in. And one of the exercises she had me do was to just look back over a period of time and write down some of the things that I learned, some of the good things to come out of those experiences. And her, rationale was, we can get into a mindset where we're looking at things from a very binary perspective. Mm-hmm. It's either good and it's all good, bad, or it's all bad, right? And and things aren't neat and simple like that, right?
Yeah.
So even when you are walking away from that job that was great, or that was the high profile, or from the marriage that people thought was perfect or great, there were some things that might have led you to leave. And there are some things that are worth celebrating in that, and lessons also that maybe you're taking away from that experience that are worth holding on to. And as I was going through it, I came across a quote, and I can't recall who it's attributed to, so forgive me, but it's on my wall right now on a sticky: pain that teaches us and pain that holds us. Right. So the lessons, because you will experience the pain, and what is it that it taught you? Maybe it taught you about boundaries. Maybe it taught you about prioritizing yourself. Maybe it taught you that you should be mindful about how much time you give to work, to your career, that you should spend more time, make sure that you are intentionally carving out time with people that you love and being present in those moments. And then, yes, there will also be what I call the hot like fire.
Yeah.
Right. That's like, all right, I learned stay far away from the gas stove where the flame is shooting up with sparks. It's all bad. I got a scar for that one.
Yeah. That quote is really beautiful. And one of my challenges is that because I've been in situations where I was able to turn the pain into a pretty powerful transformation, that sometimes when I'm struggling, I want to speed up the process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know? Oh, I'm that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was something my therapist called out. She said, I know that you get to a point where you go, I've internalized this, I've learned about it. Yep. I want to teach other people, or I want to, right? Next. Like you want to be able to say, what's the lesson here? Yeah. And she's like, you're still in it. Yeah. And it's okay that there's not a lesson yet, but there will be. And like, don't rush. Like I see you're like, I'm anxious because I'm not to that clarity yet. She's like, and remember when you got to that clarity before, it took you about a year or so. Yeah. And you're only a few months into this journey. And so that's an interesting experience I've had of don't rush the lesson. Yeah. Like don't let the pain hold you too long. And sometimes you got to sit in it before you can move through it.
Do we have the same therapist, Sarah?
I don't know. They sure sound very skillful in the same way.
Yes. Yes. That is something like as I was, finding my way through an experience, my therapist validated like, yeah, this is shitty. This is hard.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard for a while. And when she said it, I was like, wait a minute, aren't you supposed to like paint this with some flowers? Or, like paint this over?
Give me the coping mechanism to feel better about it.
Yeah. But telling me, hey, and it's going to be hard for that was, I appreciated that reality and that affirmation to help me embrace in this moment. Like this isn't going to be something that you could positive, think bath bomb your way.
Yeah.
By the weekend, into a good space. Like this is going to be hard for a while.
Yeah.
And I think the exercise and extracting the lessons, the good realized is really additive. It's really helpful. At the same time, I think it's also important to make sure people have the space to say, this just sucked. This was awful.
Yeah.
This was a shitty experience and I'm glad I'm glad I'm out of it now. Because that exists too. And I want to be careful because there's so much that you could position basically as like, hey, you can just like positive, you can positively affirm and positively think or cope your way out of it. And that's not the case. And it's perfectly acceptable to just say, this is shitty.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to be out of it. Or this was terrible and I'm glad to be out of it.
Yeah.
That's also,
and it sucks and it's the right thing for me.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
And I know it's temporary, but it's still hard.
It's still hard. Yeah.
And sometimes I think, especially in our hyper positive culture of, right, find the silver lining, that sometimes it just can be really powerful to be like, this is This sucks.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm not going to tell you anything else. It's hard. I know you'll get through it. And it sucks right now that you're in it. And, at some point, will you be in a different place and different reflection of it?
Yeah.
And it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's going to suck for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say to people who are listening right now who might be thinking, there's some changes I need to make, right? Like they're on that precipice of being courageous, whether that is taking a new career step, maybe that's leaving a toxic job, maybe that's shifting their relationship, whatever. I mean, even, the shifting relationship isn't always walking away from a relationship. It can be stepping into a relationship when you haven't had it, right? Or stepping into a new kind of relationship. What would
change in relationships? From having friends that you've been friends with for decades and realizing you're not friends, you're friends in a different way, right?
Yeah.
Your friendships change, your relationships change. There is also grief with that, right? Yeah.
What would you invite that person to hold on to, reflect about, or consider as they take that first step?
To seek out quiet and stillness. And I mean, really be still. And we often do not get the chance to do that. And if that means like you go somewhere for a weekend, and I mean, when I say still, sit with the silence, because for me, like I really have to sit in silence. There are a lot of ways I can fill my head, be it with like a podcast, music, etc. But when it's really quiet, that's when it all starts to come in, and you can really hold up the decisions that you're considering, the past, and really examine them. And so you have to get really quiet and really still, all the internal chatter, all the external chatter. So go somewhere where you can do that. And another piece of advice I would share is to not worry if you cannot see what's next. You only have to maybe take like one step, right? And sometimes that might be just a conversation. It might be sending that email or whatever it is, but you don't have to have everything mapped out. You don't even have to have 5 steps. You just need like be comfortable, be solid in whatever you're going to do, whatever the decision is, and just take one step. The one step at a time. Yeah.
I love that. Katrina, you're such a gift to this world, to our audience, to me. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we had you on. Now, for people who may be thinking about either, I'd be curious to connect with her, to learn more about this, to work with her, to bring her into my organization, what is the best way for people to connect with you? Please find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place to find me. Yeah, perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes. So thank you, my dear, for showing up, being so beautifully human as you always are, and helping us navigate what can feel really scary. I mean, it just goes back to the title of the first conversation. How do we stay soft during the hard times? I know. And this is part of how this is part of how you stay soft in the hard times is you have to show up just fully you. Yes. Be vulnerable. Yes. And show up in a way that reflects your values, who you are striving to be in this moment, because it's going to change. Yeah. Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I adore you. Likewise. Our guest this week has been Katrina Jones, and it always feels like such a hug when I get to talk to her. I always appreciate her vulnerability, her humanity, and her inviting us to step into our own humanity. And that quote that she shared of the pain that teaches you and then there's the pain that holds you is so powerful and resonant for me right now. And we want to hear from you. So reach out to us at podcast@sarahnollwilson.com, or you can send me a DM on LinkedIn, where my DMs are always open. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so in a couple of ways. First, if you haven't already, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform. The more reviews we have, the more exposure we get, and the more likely we can bring on great guests like Katrina. Also, if you want to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/conversations on conversations, where your financial support does support the team that makes this show possible, and you'll get some pretty great swag. I want to just give a huge shout out to our incredible team who makes this podcast possible. To our producer, Nick Wilson, to our sound editor, Drew Knoll, to our transcriptionist, Becky Reinert, our marketing consultant, Jessica Burge, and the rest of the Snowco crew. And just a big wholehearted thank you to Katrina Jones for showing up and just being her amazing self. This has been Conversations on Conversations. Thank you all so much for listening. And remember, when we can change the conversations we have with ourselves and others, we can change the world. So, my friends, till next week, please be sure to rest, rehydrate, and we'll see you again soon.